In the quiet of the wild, you lose everything you were taught, to find everything you were meant to be. This is where true freedom lies. The sun was a bleeding wound on the horizon, casting a crimson stain across the dust as the air above the Western Star Ranch filled with screams and the sharp, relentless crackle of gunfire. Clara stood frozen in the doorway of her family home, a heavy hunting rifle clutched tightly in her hands, its cold steel a poor comfort against the wave of terror. Their family, known throughout the territory for their quiet honesty and peaceful life, had become the target of a long, simmering, bitter grudge. The ranch was now a scene of utter chaos, a storm of vengeance brought by the ruthless Sterling Thorne. He had arrived with a band of men, their faces etched with a hungry, predatory cruelty, each one a mirror of his own twisted heart. Thorne had been a rival of her father for years, and now his desire for twisted retribution had arrived in a devastating torrent of lead. "Run, Clara, run!" her father Henry bellowed, his voice filled with a desperate plea that cut through the chaos like a whip. He was a good man, a man who had always believed in a fair fight and a just cause, but this was no such thing. With a final, desperate act of love, he had drawn his six-shooter and stood his ground, a shield of courage against the storm. A bullet from a rifle cracked through the evening air, and a moment later he fell to the dust without a sound, his body a quiet, heartbreaking tragedy. The sight of her father's fall was a physical blow to Clara's spirit. She did not hesitate, her mind a blank slate of singular purpose. Dropping the rifle, she darted out the back door, a ghost in the swirling smoke. The path to the stable felt like an impossible distance, a treacherous journey through a landscape of fire and fading hope. The shouts of Thorne's men were close behind, their cruel, triumphant laughter echoing in the evening air. As she reached the stable, a sharp sting blossomed in her thigh. A bullet had struck her, and a wave of fire spread through her leg, a searing reminder of her loss. She gritted her teeth against the overwhelming pain, the nauseating cocktail of gunpowder and burning wood filling her senses. She found her horse, a sturdy bay mare, and with a desperate surge of strength, she hoisted herself into the saddle, the searing agony a constant, brutal reminder of her loss. Kicking the mare into a panicked gallop, Clara rode out into the gathering dark, away from the familiar land that was now a pyre, a monument to a senseless crime. The world had shrunk to the burning ache in her leg and the thunder of the hooves below her. She had left behind everything she had ever known, her home, her family, and her innocence. All of it turned to ash and smoke by Thorne's cold, hungry hand. Her mare ran until its strength gave out entirely, collapsing in the harsh desert, leaving Clara stranded and alone, a lone figure in a vast, unforgiving void, her mind fading into a dark, silent emptiness. The profound silence was the first thing Clara registered when she awoke. It was a deep, powerful quiet, broken only by the gentle rustle of the wind. She was lying on a makeshift bed of animal hides, and the air carried the comforting, earthy scent of dry sage and something she did not recognize. Her leg, a throbbing and persistent reminder of her violent escape, was wrapped in a dressing she had never seen before. A man sat nearby, his face carved from the deep shadows, his eyes watching her with a patient, yet penetrating gaze that held no malice. He was a quiet tracker, a man named Taki, and he had found her just as her faithful horse had drawn its last breath. Taki had approached her without a sound, a phantom in the harsh landscape. He saw a woman whose eyes held not panic but a fierce, unbroken resolve, a flicker of light in a sea of despair. Instead of abandoning her to the elements, he had done something his own people might have considered reckless, carrying her to an unknown safety. He took her to a hidden refuge, a small canyon where a small number of his kin had made their home, away from the encroaching world and its endless conflicts. This place was his sanctuary, his place of peace, and he had, in an act of profound compassion, made her a part of it. He found a strange solace in her strength. The refuge was not a bustling village, but a single, serene encampment, a collection of humble dwellings built directly into the canyon walls. Its elder, a man with a weathered face and a powerful, quiet presence, was Sapa, Taki's grandfather. Sapa examined Clara's wound with knowing hands, his touch gentle but firm. Without a word, he began to treat it with a paste made from crushed desert plants Clara had never seen before, their scent strange and medicinal, all while Taki watched in silence. The air was filled with a sense of quiet respect and an unspoken understanding of her pain. Clara had expected stories of barbarism, but she found a quiet dignity that was unnerving in its stark contrast to the world she knew. Sapa's movements were deliberate and sure, each a testament to a lifetime of wisdom. He did not speak, but his actions communicated a profound understanding of the land and its ancient medicine. Clara, weakened and in pain, watched as he worked, her mind trying to reconcile the dreadful stories she had been told in town with the man who was now saving her life. The bandage was tied securely, and she was left to rest, the pain in her leg slowly receding into a distant memory. She knew that in this place, far from the polished drawing rooms and prejudiced whispers of the city, she was truly in the hands of strangers. Yet, she did not feel afraid. She felt a sense of peace. Days blurred into weeks as Clara's wound slowly but surely healed. The raw, burning pain that had consumed her slowly became a dull ache, then faded entirely. She was a woman who was used to hard, honest work on a ranch, but here she was taught a different, more profound kind of labor. Sapa, with Taki often translating his quiet wisdom, showed her how to read the silent language of the wind, how to track the furtive movements of small animals, and how to find sustenance in a land that seemed to the untrained eye to be entirely barren. Her hands, calloused from years of tending to the ranch, now learned the new, intricate skill of weaving with plant fibers. The canyon was a world unto itself, a living, breathing place with its own ancient rhythms. Clara found a strange peace here, a profound solace she had never known in her past life, even with all its comforts and familiarity. While she was learning, the ghosts of Sterling Thorn and his band were still hunting her. They scoured the desert, their horses raising thick, choking clouds of dust in their relentless search for her. In the towns, they spoke in sneering tones, calling the local inhabitants savages and heathens, convinced that Clara had some valuable proof of their twisted crimes with her. Thorn was a man driven by a singular, all-consuming greed. He believed that Clara's family had documents that proved his own lineage was a lie, a deep and dark secret that would threaten his position in the territory. He was a man willing to burn the entire world to the ground to find her. The men with him were no better, their own viciousness and brutal nature a direct mirror of his. Meanwhile, back at what was left of the Western Star Ranch, Clara's father, Henry, having miraculously survived his wound, had hired a team of the best trackers money could buy to find his daughter. The race was now on, a dangerous game of hide-and-seek across the vast and unforgiving landscape. The tension in the air was a constant, almost physical thing, a silent predator stalking them. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound of hooves, every change in the wind sent a spike of fear through Clara's heart. She knew they were close. She had seen the way Thorn's men behaved in town, their crude words and rough manner, a testament to their cruel and empty hearts. She would not be taken. Not as long as she had a say in the matter, she was ready to fight. Her newfound skills and the quiet, unwavering resolve of Taki gave her a new kind of strength, a strength she did not know she possessed. The bond between Clara and Taki deepened with each passing day. He showed her the hidden springs, the way the light changed on the canyon walls, and how to move through the land as if she were a part of it, a natural element in a wild landscape. Their hands often touched during these lessons, his calloused from a lifetime of hunting, hers from a lifetime of ranch work. These fleeting moments were an unspoken communication, a silent language of touch that spoke of trust and a growing connection. It was a bond that went far beyond mere words, deeper than any she had ever known. One evening, under a sky studded with 1,000,000 brilliant stars, Taki spoke of his past. He had been sent to a boarding school where they tried to beat the knowledge of his people out of him, to make him into something he was not. He spoke of the isolation of living between two worlds, of belonging fully to neither. Clara listened, her heart aching for the young man he had been, for the pain he had endured. She understood that feeling of being caught between two different worlds, for she had lived a life of social expectation, and now existed in a world that was a stark contrast to everything she had ever known. The time spent together in the canyon was a world away from the suffocating pressures of her old life. There was no need for fancy clothes or polite, empty conversation. Here she felt more herself than ever before. Her past was like a distant echo, a faint, blurred memory of a woman she no longer recognized, a life she no longer belonged to. She learned to appreciate silence, to find comfort in the quiet, steady company of another soul. They shared a connection that transcended their different upbringings, a quiet understanding that was more profound than any conversation. The intimacy between them grew, not through grand gestures, but through simple, shared moments. When he corrected her form with a bow and arrow, his body was a quiet, solid presence behind her, a protective wall against the world. When he pointed out the constellations, his hand would rest on her shoulder a moment longer than necessary, a gentle, comforting weight. It was a slow, deliberate dance of two souls finding a home in one another, a silent language of affection. There was a respect in his touch that spoke volumes, a tenderness that Clara had never experienced from the men in her world. In the heart of the canyon, they were simply two people, stripped of their pasts, building a new future together. Redford had been with Thorne's men for a week, and with each passing day, the man's cruelty became clearer, more horrifying. He had worked for Henry, Clara's father, for years, and had developed a deep, quiet respect for the family. He knew Thorne's claim of revenge was a lie, a transparent ruse to cover his true motives. He overheard Thorne boasting to his men that he wanted the family's inheritance, a legacy that was supposed to pass to Clara. Thorne was not looking for justice, but for greed. This was not about revenge, but about seizing what did not belong to him, and he would stop at nothing to get it, even murder. Redford's conscience gnawed at him, a constant, sharp pain in his chest. He could not stand by and watch this happen. He had to warn Clara, to save her from the very men he was traveling with, from the very man who had killed her father. He was a simple man, a man who believed in a clear line between right and wrong. He waited for his chance, slipping away from the bandit camp under the cover of a moonless night. He rode hard, following the trail he knew Thorne would take, his heart a relentless drumbeat of fear and determination. He prayed he was not too late. Redford was not a tracker like Taki, but he was a man of the land. He knew the general direction Clara had taken, and he rode with a singular, desperate focus. He found her and Taki by a small, hidden stream, their forms barely visible in the morning light. He called out to them, his voice hoarse from the long ride. "Clara, Taki, Thorne is not after documents. He is after your inheritance, and he will not stop until he has it. He killed your father to get it." The words were a bitter truth, a devastating confirmation of Clara's worst fears. A shot rang out from the rocks above, a sudden, sharp sound that shattered the morning's peace. Redford stumbled, a new wound blooming on his chest. A bandit who had been following him had found his target. "He will burn this place to the ground." Redford managed to yell, his voice strained and weak. Taki, without hesitation, drew his rifle and fired back. The bandit, surprised by the sudden retaliation, scrambled back into the rocks and fled. Taki ran to Redford, but it was too late. Redford's last breath was a desperate gasp of a warning. They now knew that Thorne was close, and they had to be ready. The air grew heavy with the smell of danger, a palpable tension that settled over the canyon. Clara and Taki knew they could not stay here any longer. The ambush was no longer a secret. Thorne knew their location. They decided to make their stand. They led Sapa to a safe location, deep within the mountains, a place only known to a few, a quiet sanctuary where he would be safe from the coming conflict. As they walked, Clara's mind reeled from the loss of Redford and the horrifying truth of Thorne's treachery. Her father had been murdered for a twisted sense of entitlement, for a legacy that meant nothing to a man like Thorne, a man with no sense of honor. Sapa blessed them before they parted, his hand on Taki's shoulder, a silent message of respect and love. He looked at Clara, and she saw in his eyes a deep, unwavering trust that brought tears to her own. "Go," he said in his language, which she now understood well. "Go and be strong." They left him and moved to a strategic point in a narrow canyon, a natural choke point that would serve as the perfect place for an ambush. They prepared for a confrontation, their hearts heavy with a sense of dread, but their resolve stronger than ever before. Taki and Clara stood at the top of a rock formation, their rifles ready. They had only a few bullets, and they had to make every single one count. They did not have the manpower of Thorn's gang, but they had the advantage of surprise and superior knowledge of the land. A tense silence fell over the canyon as they waited. They could hear the approaching hooves of Thorn's men, their voices a low, menacing murmur that grew louder with each passing moment. Clara's heart was a drumbeat in her chest, a mix of pure fear and a cold, hard resolve to protect the man who had saved her. The bandits entered the canyon, their forms a dark, menacing silhouette against the pale sky. They were not subtle. They rode with the arrogance of men who believe they are untouchable, a cruel and arrogant swagger that spoke of their past crimes. As they moved into the narrow passage, Taki gave a quiet signal, and they both opened fire. The first few bandits fell in a disorienting chaos, their horses spooked and whinnying in terror. The rest of them scrambled for cover, their panicked shouts echoing in the canyon. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire, a terrible chorus of steel and rage. Clara, a woman of peace, was now a warrior, her aim true and steady. The battle raged on. The bandits, disoriented and surprised, struggled to find a secure position in the rugged terrain. Taki moved with the agility of a mountain cat, firing from different positions, his shots finding their mark with an unsettling accuracy. Clara, in a new world of her own making, was just as effective. She had learned to shoot as a child, but Taki had taught her to shoot with a purpose, with a quiet, lethal grace. She fired her rifle with a steady hand. One of Thorn's men, a tall man with a dark mustache, was struck in the arm as he was reloading his weapon. He fell back, clutching his wound. The remaining bandits took cover behind the rocks, their movements more cautious now, their arrogance replaced with a sense of dread. They had underestimated Clara and Taki, assuming they would be an easy target, a simple prey to be caught. Thorn, enraged by the unexpected resistance, shouted orders to his men, his voice a raw, angry sound that spoke of a man losing control. "Get them! Do not let those heathens escape. They have what is mine." He was not a man to be reasoned with. Clara took a deep breath, reloaded her rifle, and braced herself for the next assault, her heart filled with resolve. She had never been in a fight like this before. It was a terrifying yet exhilarating reality. The gunfire from both sides was a relentless, terrifying rhythm that echoed through the canyon. One of the bandits, a big, bearded man, tried to flank them, moving quietly through the rocks, but Clara, with her newfound skills, saw him in time. She took a careful aim and fired. The bandit was struck in the leg and went down with a loud cry of pain. Another of Thorn's men was struck in the shoulder. Taki, despite the intense situation, seemed to be calm, almost unnervingly so. He saw the world in a way she never had. A world of angles, shadows, and opportunities. A world where survival was an art form. In the midst of the chaos, a rogue bullet struck Taki. He winced, a brief flash of pain crossing his face, but he did not fall. The bullet was lodged in his upper arm. He immediately took cover behind a large rock, a silent testament to his resilience and strength. He continued to provide cover fire, his aim still true, still lethal. Clara's heart hammered in her chest, a mix of fear and a furious, burning need to protect him. She returned fire, not to kill, but to keep the bandits at bay, to give him a chance to recover. She would not let them win. Just as their ammunition was running low and the situation was becoming desperate, they heard the distinct and welcome sound of more horses. This time, it was not Thorn's men. It was the rhythmic, organized sound of cavalry, a sound that meant order, and the law had finally arrived. Lieutenant Harding and his patrol had finally reached their destination. Harding was a man of his word, and he had been on Thorn's trail for weeks, following him from town to town. He had a reputation for being relentless and fair. Now he had finally caught his prey, right in the heart of the canyon. Harding's men moved quickly and silently, their movements fluid and practiced, taking positions above and below the bandits. They had cornered Thorne's men in the canyon. The lieutenant, a tall man with a stern, unyielding face, saw Clara and Taki at a distance, their rifles aimed at the bandits. He was a man of the law, and he saw a clear line between the innocent and the guilty. He had known Clara's family and respected Henry. He also knew that Thorne was a criminal, a murderer, and a thief, and he was not going to get away with his crimes. A short, violent firefight ensued between the cavalry and Thorne's men. The bandits, caught between two powerful forces, were quickly overpowered. One of Thorne's men was shot and killed as he tried to make a desperate run for it. Thorne himself, desperate and enraged, was shot in the leg by one of Harding's men and fell to the ground, defeated and a prisoner. The remaining bandits surrendered, their faces pale with fear and their arrogance gone. It was a swift, decisive end to the violence that had plagued them for so long. Harding's patrol secured Thorne and his men, their chains clinking in the canyon's silence. The lieutenant then approached Clara and Taki. He saw Taki's wound and the blood on his arm, and he looked at Clara, who stood protectively by his side, her rifle still in her hand. "Clara," he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and concern. "We have been looking for you. Are you all right?" Clara nodded, her eyes fixed on Taki, her hands trembling. She had been through so much, had faced danger and had prevailed. She was not the same woman he had known. Harding saw the respect in Clara's eyes as she looked at Taki, the way she stood protectively by his side. "He saved my life, Lieutenant," Clara said, her voice clear and strong, her conviction unwavering. She told him the entire story, about the ruthless attack on the ranch, the tragic death of her father, and how Taki had found her, healed her, and taught her to survive in a land that was once a mystery. She spoke of Thorne's cruel motives and how he had hunted her without mercy. She did not sound like a captive, but like a warrior. Her voice was filled with a conviction that left no room for doubt. Harding listened intently, his stern face showing no emotion, but his eyes were filled with a dawning respect for the young woman. He was a man who had seen many things, but this was a story unlike any other. He looked at Taki and saw not a savage, but a man of immense strength and courage, a man who had protected a woman he barely knew. He saw the profound bond between the two of them, a connection forged in the crucible of violence and survival. He knew that the world he came from would not understand this, but he did. He respected what they had done. A quiet, peaceful calm settled over the canyon. A medic from the patrol tended to Taki's wound, his hands gentle and practiced. The bullet was extracted, and the wound was cleaned and bandaged. Taki looked at Clara, his eyes filled with gratitude and an unspoken promise. She looked back at him, her heart overflowing with love. She had found a man who had saved her, not just from the bandits, but from her own limitations, from the suffocating expectations of the world she had left behind. In this place, with him, she felt a profound sense of peace. Lieutenant Harding looked at them for a long moment, a conflicted expression on his face. He had a duty to bring Clara back to civilization, to her father and her family, but he saw the look in her eyes and knew that her heart was here. "Your father is alive, Clara," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "He has been looking for you, and he will be happy to see you. We can take you to him now." Clara's heart ached for her father, but her eyes did not waver. She was not a prisoner. She was a woman who had made a choice she would not regret. After Thorne and his men were arrested and taken into custody, Clara was faced with a difficult choice. She could return to her old life, to the comforts of the town, to the life that had been mapped out for her since birth, a life of social expectations and mundane duties, but that life felt like a ghost now, a faded memory. It no longer belonged to her. Her home was not in a house with a crystal chandelier and imported wallpaper. Her home was in the vastness of the desert, in the deep silence of the canyon, and in the quiet strength of the man who stood beside her. Clara's father, Henry, having recovered from his wound, came to the canyon to find her. He was a man of his time, a man of law and order, but he was also a man who loved his daughter more than anything. He saw Clara, a different woman now, a woman who had faced death and chosen life. He saw Taki, a man who had risked everything to save his daughter. He saw the love in their eyes, a profound connection forged in the fire of survival, a bond that could not be broken by prejudice or expectations. Henry looked at Taki, a man from a world he had been taught to fear and distrust, and saw a man of honor. He saw a man who had saved his daughter when he could not. Henry, a man who believed in a fair fight and a just cause, gave his heartfelt blessing to their union. He knew that she had found a home, a true home, not in a building but in a man. He understood that love could not be contained by race or by custom, that it was a force of nature as powerful as the storms that swept across the desert. And so, Clara chose to stay. She and Taki remained in the canyon, building a life together, their love a testament to their strength and resilience. Their story became a local legend, a tale of a woman who chose to follow her heart into the wilderness, and a man who showed her what it meant to be truly free. Their happiness was not found in the material wealth of the world she had left behind, but in the quiet moments of shared companionship, a love that was as enduring as the mountains that sheltered them, a wild and beautiful love that would live on in the stories for generations to come.